All right, so I told you guys about this project that one of the main things is that you have to make sure that you are not violating copyright, right? Like I said, it has to be an original image where you could be, like, ostensibly go out there and like sell this. I need everyone looking up because they're going to see some picture examples here. All right, so copyright. Probably a lot of you guys at this point in your life know exactly what's going on here, but just to clear it up, copyright protects people who create things. Not just companies. That's kind of one of the biggest misconceptions. It's the exclusive legal right to distribute intellectual property or the exclusive right to make money off of a creation. And that's any kind of creation, not just like images and videos and like books and stuff, but it can be like performances, like anything uploaded online that you created. Copyright protection is automatic. You don't have to pay for it. It is there the second that you've created something. However, where money comes in is actually enforcing copyright and trying to get control of something back from potentially somebody who stole something that you made. All right, so let's talk about kind of what has happened in the world of copyright in the last 30 or 40 years here. Some of you guys who kind of know what Disney has done sort of know where I'm going with this. So rights to like properties and created things are bought and sold constantly. So that is how Disney's got basically this massive stranglehold on all these huge properties, is because they've bought the copyright. Buying rights is tricky. There are rules to it. For example, the Fantastic Four as a property, as a comic book property. Originally, obviously, Marvel, Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, I forget who else was involved in that original one. They originally owned the copyright. They sold the copyright to some random dude back in the 80s because they needed money because Marvel was going bankrupt at that point. And that guy wanted to maintain the rights. He didn't do anything with it. He owned the rights to the Fantastic Four to make movies, and he just didn't do anything with it, but he wanted to hang on to it because he knew it was going to be worth money someday. So he made a movie in 1994. He paid a person to make a really terrible movie just to maintain the copyright, because otherwise the rights would have gone back to Marvel, and that's what he was trying to avoid. You can actually see that it's a bootleg 1994, very cheaply made movie, but kind of impressive for how cheaply made it was. And here's another one that if any of you guys have ever gone to a theme park down in Florida, you have seen this. The Marvel characters are at Universal, right? Islands of Adventure. You go to Islands of Adventure, they've got a Spider-Man ride, a Hulk ride, they've got like an X-Men like little kids ride. Basically east of the Mississippi, Universal still owns the theme park rights to most Marvel characters, the vast majority of Marvel characters. And this is a kind of weird situation for Disney, because here they are, they bought Marvel, but as long as Universal maintains those rides and keeps that up and doesn't tarnish the brand, they basically get to keep those for forever. So this is actually a big reason why Disney is sort of amplifying weirder characters like the not the Fantastic Four, like Guardians of the Galaxy, because they don't have a ride there at Universal. So that's something that they can actually have over here, even though it's east of the Mississippi. This is also why Disneyland over in California can have rides that we can't have here. I don't know why my email decided to cut that off. That was weird. All right. So yeah, that's a whole ongoing issue. So there is such a thing as the public domain. Intellectual property becomes public domain when it's no longer under copyright protection, and you can just use it freely. Those rules have changed a lot. It used to be something went into the public domain like within 15 years of the death of the creator, something like that. But Disney has been basically extending that and extending that and extending that, because they are basically every year about to lose copyright on Mickey Mouse. So what that means is that you could put Mickey Mouse on merchandise and sell it, and they can't come after you after Mickey Mouse goes into the public domain. The general rule is that it's 80 years after the death of the creator, but again, that's like kind of getting messed with. But yeah, there's a reason there's so many like Sherlock Holmes adaptations and Frankenstein and Dracula. Those are public domain characters. Anyone can use them. Their creators died a long time ago. So yeah, we just said that Mickey Mouse should have been in the public domain ages ago. Happy Birthday as a song. That was actually still in copyright until like 3 or 4 years ago. So there's a reason why TV shows, movies, and stuff never sang the whole thing, or they would do something else instead. There's like entire plot lines like on like regular show and stuff about coming up with other versions of Happy Birthday, because otherwise you had to pay the rights to use it. Winnie the Pooh literally just entered the public domain like within this last month, but it's only the original version of Winnie the Pooh. The A.A. Milne, I believe, was his name. This version of Winnie the Pooh, however, is Disney's version they made in the 70s. So if you try to make merchandise with this one, you're going to get in trouble. You can do all the classic Winnie the Pooh and his friends, except for Tigger, who still has 2 more years before he's in public domain, that you would want to, because that has been 80 years since the death of the creator. All right, so moving on from public domain, oops, I skipped trademark. So there's copyright and then there's trademark. So trademark is what you use when it's something that it's hard to maintain the rights on, hard to enforce. And so you use it for phrases, characters, slogans, that are part of a larger brand. Companies use trademark to establish their brand. So words like, I use Halo, for example, here, because you can see a little tiny TM there. And Nike, those are actual words. Halo is like, like an angel's halo. Nike was it the Greek god of sports, basically, athlete, something like that. So those are actual words. You can't claim ownership of them. You cannot say, like, we own this word. So that's why they turn things into like Halo, like :infinite, Halo, like 3, all these like Halo Reach. That's what they can actually copyright, is the whole phrase. Air Jordan can be copyrighted, but Nike can't. Trademarks have to be applied for. They are not automatic, and they get really difficult to enforce when they become part of our language. So a lot of people just say Kleenex when they mean like go grab a tissue, right? But Kleenex is a brand, it's trademarked. They don't like when people do that because they could mean a different brand. Photoshop, that's a big one. Photoshop hates people using Photoshop for just generically editing pictures because that's their brand. They need to protect that, especially because Photoshopping has become like a kind of negative word, and so that looks bad for them. So yeah, companies don't tend to like that if their word gets used in a bad context. Fair use is when you can use parts of copyrighted works and materials for educational or critical purposes. So copyright is a law that's got like lots and lots of like very specific things there, versus fair use is more like guidelines. So it's all kind of flexible. The purpose, amount, nature, and effect of the borrowed materials determines if something is okay to use or not. That means it's on a per case scenario. It has to be credited, and it can only be used for basically critical or educational purposes. Parody counts as criticism. So you have an entire genre of movies, not as popular anymore, where they were able to use copyrighted characters, phrases, everything that they wanted to, because it was a parody of those things, therefore a criticism of it. There was a sort of comedic thing / art installation, I think this was like last year, no, 2 years ago, where a comedian literally just opened up a store in LA called Dumb Starbucks. And he had t-shirts made to say Dumb Starbucks, cups, mugs, everything, Dumb Starbucks. It counted as parody because he was like doing a parody, like all the people who worked there were super rude. It was like, it was kind of like a stunt. Basically, it would have taken Starbucks forever to try to take him down on copyright because he fell under fair use. However, they got him first off on health code violations because he didn't do the proper paperwork to open a coffee store. But second, they had managed to get him on making Starbucks trademark look bad from doing this and getting those health code violations. So fair use is kind of sticky. So there's different rules for different kinds of fair use. If you're going to take something from print material, it has to be 10% or less, basically. Images, you can use no more than 5 from a single artist. Usually it's like 10% of something is what you can use, and it's considered fair use. And it still has to be educational or for criticism. So here is one from back in the 90s. There's the whole O.J. Simpson trial, right? Where man had this huge, very famous public trial for murdering his wife. They made a little like Cat in the Hat style parody, but the thing is it was a parody of the trial itself and not of Dr. Seuss. So they got a big old like copyright infringement lawsuit against them because they weren't doing a parody of Dr. Seuss. They were using Dr. Seuss's style to sell something else entirely, so it didn't work. So that didn't work for that purpose there. If they'd just done like a parody of Cat in the Hat, and there's tons out there, that would have been fine. But they were using Dr. Seuss's art style, using 5 or more images from the single artist, basically, and that didn't count. All right, Last little thing I want to go through here is Creative Commons. A lot of stuff out there is actually free for you to use, but it's sort of marked a little bit differently. So there's Creative Commons, images, videos, all sorts of stuff out there. Anytime I've had a YouTube video that you guys have seen on like that of my like tutorials, that's always Creative Commons music that I use on there. So it has to be marked. You have to like let people know that something's Creative Commons, and you can tell them how you allow them to use it. So if it's by, you have to credit the original person. If it says NC, you can only use it for non-commercial use. You can't make money off of it. If it says ND, that means you can only do derivative works from it. A lot of people say Creative Commons, totally free and usable. You can do anything you want with this. But a lot of people will be like, you can only use this to make derivative works, or you can only use this if you're not going to make money off of it. That's probably the most common one. Always check that when you're using any Creative Commons stuff, especially things like fonts. I almost got in hot water a couple of times from some clients who wanted me to do logos, and they kept wanting me to use fonts that I was like, okay, if you want me to use that font, you have to buy that font. I don't have the rights to use that. You have to buy it in order to get that. All right, derivative works. This gets into y'all's project. So it is the weirdest part of Creative Commons and copyright because there's no laws or anything here. It's just a kind of individual judgment of when something a derivative work. So generally, if you want to do derivative works, avoid the companies that are famous for going after people and suing them. Disney, Sanrio, Nickelodeon, anything like that. Disney especially famous for back in the early 90s going after a bunch of daycare centers who had Disney characters painted on their walls and suing them for way more money than those places ever could make. If you're trying to make money off of anything that's a copyrighted character, basically what most people do is you just don't sell online widely, you don't use the exact words, you make unique products. I'll show you guys what I mean by that in a second here. If it's just a traced or bootleg version of something like what you're seeing up here, yeah, that's just plain, like, that's not derivative. That's just plagiarizing. This is just tracing Pokemon characters and putting a pig nose on one of them. Versus over here, we have a completely separate property that used similar ideas, used the popularity of the previous one, but is its own thing entirely. So it wouldn't get in trouble. Now, that's not to say people have made derivative works that were based on original things and have gone off and made something else entirely. There's fan fiction that's gotten turned into books and movies. There's entire parts of video games, entire categories of video games that have gone off and become their own thing. Biggest example that I know of, because I know a lot of people involved with this, Dota, Defense of the Ancients. So Valve produces Dota, but Dota was originally a Warcraft like custom map made by a player. So there was Warcraft 3 from back in the early 2000s, made by Blizzard / Activision now, I guess, / now Microsoft also, I guess. Good lord, things are complicated. So this was like just like a player-made little like mode in this game. And then somebody has gone off and made Dota, Defense of the Ancients, and basically made this entire genre of games, your MOBA now, that is all derivative of this. And you can even look at the art from Dota, which is what you're seeing down here. This is Dota, that's Dota. You can see that they didn't even change that much from the original game when they made their derivative work. All right, so here's where we're getting into your project. So when you guys are doing these, you have to figure out how can you take stuff from pictures and not run into issues, basically. So what you see here, not a problem. I sampled from 2 different images entirely. I've like stole the pot from here, stole 2 pieces of the bacon from here, and I just kind of kept flipping them, erasing parts of them, and like rotating them to get different ones. You can't tell that this is from these 2 pictures. It was a reference. That does not, like, reference is never a problem. All right, this is probably not a problem. It's like I did like change some things, obviously the color, what he's holding, the paws, a couple other things, and it's also a completely different product. The original thing was a stuffed animal. The thing that I made is a little Valentine's card, totally different product. The issue here is, like I said here, if this was a stuffed animal of a famous character, like if this was a stuffed animal of like Goofy, yeah, I couldn't get away with this. But because it's just a generic little, you know, just a regular sea otter there, pretty much no problem. This one's a little trickier. It might be a problem because that original photo is so very distinct and it's pretty clearly the same thing. I did just straight up trace it. I did have to go in there and make up some information for where it's so blurry. It is still like different. It's still me tracing a photo, but that's like, that might become a problem. This also might be a problem. I didn't quite change enough there. Again, it's more just like I just traced the bears. If I was trying to go sell this online, I'd probably do something like different with like their little paws. Maybe make it like so they were a little bit more cartoony around their faces. Do like a couple more things there to really make that more different from the photo. This, however, is straight up copyright violation. It does not matter that I made Pikachu have heart-shaped cheek things. It does not matter that I may have him with a heart-shaped tail, especially since I think that's in the actual games. It doesn't matter that I changed out what he's holding. It doesn't matter that it's like a card instead of a screenshot from a show. It's still copyright violation. It's still obviously me just tracing this original thing and just changing one or two things. Now, as I say here, this does not stop some people from doing this online. There's definitely a whole market out there, especially things like conventions where it's very hard to enforce copyright and people are selling physical things and not stuff online. Now, here's the thing. I do some of this. I've made quite a bit of money online selling some like merchandise from big IPs. I don't know how some of these have not been taken down, especially considering things that I have had taken down, but I do know some explanations for some of them. Metapod over here is a Pokemon. However, I think the reason, because I actually asked someone about this, they're like, that probably falls under parody, and like, because it's something that Pokemon itself does not offer, you're fine. If Pokemon, like Nintendo wanted to start selling tank tops, workout tank tops with Metapod on it, yeah, they might go give me a takedown notice, but they don't, so I don't. Over here, this is from Doctor Who, very old show, almost like falling into public domain, actually, now that I think about it. But the whole like central like thing that he uses to travel in time in Doctor Who is just like an old school phone booth, basically. You can't copyright that, it's just a thing. Versus down here, this was a paper cut thing that I made. So I've like sliced out painted papers, but Disney still gave me a DMCA on it because it was still giving using their characters on that. So interesting things to work with. All right, so when you guys are working on this project, what you need to do is look at what you're using as your source images and figure out, okay, what am I doing as far as how much am I taking from this original picture? What do I need to do to make sure that it's not like recognizable or that I've changed enough that it doesn't quite count the same? Let me go ahead and minimize this and turn this off. Dismiss. Leave.